And welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast. Folks, we have a great show in store for you today. We sit down with a extremely courageous and strong woman by the name of Denise Caldon Sorkness. She has been fighting the VA for 28 years. And let me explain why. Now, Denise lost her husband due to Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. Now, the VA certified his death, but when Denise went to receive the death benefit, the VA had paid the wrong person due to fraudulent documents being submitted to remove Denise from the spousal benefits. And ever since, she has been fighting the good fight with the VA to get the spousal benefits that she deserves from her husband. It's one thing to go out there and grieve the loss of a loved one, especially a husband. And it's a whole other fight to go up against the VA, this federal massive bureaucracy, when you are in your weakest and most vulnerable time in need. And with that, we are honored to be joined by Denise Caldon Sorkness. How are you, ma'am?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Absolutely. You know, us VA warfighters, we got to stick together. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, Denise, you have been fighting for 28 years. And so, you know, this podcast is only so long. And you know, you've done so much out there in the public eye, and you've really brought a energy that is very rarely seen. How did this all happen? You know, you're married, you're living your life. Unfortunately, years down the road after Vietnam, he passes away due to Agent Orange. And what happens next?
Well, first, I'd like to salute all the veterans and active military out there, because I want to make sure my this is a purpose I never asked for, but I've accepted, because I want their service and sacrifices to never be forgotten. Unfortunately, my family's ultimate sacrifice and service were forgotten by the VA for 28 years. As a veteran's widow who I've fought the claim system for the 28 years, I speak publicly, but I'm not a professional speaker. I speak from the heart, so bear with me. I used to pray, and I took this from someone else and I kind of revised it. I used to pray for somebody to just stand up, speak up, and voice the concerns of so many veterans and their families. And then one day I realized that I am somebody. So it's important to remember that every veteran and their family have a story, and I'm just sharing mine today. First, I'd like to reintroduce myself, Brian. I am VA file 28918-810. Just like thousands of veterans and their families to the VA, we don't have a name. We have a file number. My late husband, Jim, was a Navy Seabee. He served in Vietnam in the late 60s. And he and I lived in a home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, on 10 acres of land. And we built our dream home that he designed for 10 years. And we built it together, and we were located on the Hall River. It was the American dream. In January of 1987, our children, by the way, were only 2, 4, and 6. In January of 1987, when our children were very young, our American dream was completely taken away. We were informed that Jim had stage 4 non-hodgkins lymphoma, and that he had only 2 years to live. Jim lived for 9, but tragically, this through no fault of his own, Jim experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, and we were told later through a medical assessment that he also had psychotic decompression as a result of experimental chemo. In other words, our environment there got very erratic and scary and frightening at times. In fact, I've written some in my book, but there are others I will never speak of. I was also learned that the chemo that he was given that time was no longer used now because of what it did to him. Our family psychologist, Dr. Carolyn Schroeder in Chapel Hill, she was in our family, visited our family for years, helping us deal with his terminal illness. And she repeatedly said to me over the years, Brian, you've got to remove yourself for your safety and the children's. And I said no for years. And it finally got to the point where I knew I had no choice. In August of 1993, Jim actually departed our home that we built for 10 years. And he moved to another state to live with someone that he had known from high school. And our young children and I relocated to Georgia to be with family during his last years of terminal illness. We ended up losing the home that we built for 10 years to foreclosure. It was sold for over $400,000 then. I've been told it's over $1 million now. So unfortunately, Jim died 3 years later on July 17, 1996. His death was, like you said, certified by the VA as service-related. I attended Jim's funeral in Massachusetts with our young children. And a few weeks later, I went to the Veteran Services in Macon, Georgia, to get my DIC spousal benefits, only to be told that his living girlfriend has already received them. It ended up, I learned later, she had submitted documents that were fraudulent. She submitted a marriage certificate. We were never divorced. And she even submitted a divorce decree, and we were never divorced. They were termed later. They were certified fraudulent by the North Carolina courts. When I later brought that error to the attention of the VA in Portland, Oregon, where they lived, the VA representative said to me, "That's not our problem. You will have to get a personal lawyer." Well, that was when my 28-year battle began. I was working full-time, raising 3 young children, and also battling the VA full-time.
Your 3 children were Jim's children, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. But he was he was unfortunately not himself, and he didn't understand that they were gone too. And I could tell you more about that, but I won't. But I've always honored him because he gave the ultimate sacrifice. It was not his fault because he was the all-American father for a long time. We were married 16 years. Yes.
Yeah. So it was the shell shock. That's what they call basically post-traumatic stress today is the shell shock of yesterday from Vietnam.
Right.
And so he was living with, all this Agent Orange exposure. And then, of course, he gets the, non-hodgkins lymphoma. He's given 2 years to live. He outlives it. He lives in 9, but his mind begins to unravel.
That's correct.
And he leaves prior to his death with a girlfriend, basically. And what I understand is that the girlfriend robbed you of your spousal benefit to you and Jim's 3 children.
She did. Yes, exactly. In fact, I lost count on how many times I sold furniture from our home or went to the pawn shop just to put food on the table while she was getting her benefits and I was working full time and raising our children. But I will say in 2008, I actually went to a hearing. I borrowed money and went to a hearing in Washington, D.C. before the BVA judge. And as we were walking down the hall, Brian, the DAV representative said to me, because he knew about my case, he said, "You do realize that your claim will never be resolved." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it would open up too many others just like yours. You do know that the VA's unwritten policy up here in Washington is stall, deny, and hope they die." And that is the very reason, Brian, that I have the title of my book. It came directly from the mouth of a DAV representative that told me that in 2008. After 10 years, I finally submitted. I even submitted a Freedom of Information Act. This was before technology was so prevalent. And I got a box delivered to my home. And as I'm going through the box, Brian, I found a letter that was addressed. I'll call this woman CC. Those are her initials, CC. And it was addressed to her by the VA just 30 days after she had applied for my benefits in 1996. And it said, according to our records, he's still married. In other words, they even knew that and they did nothing about it. And in other words, the VA knew that she had submitted fraudulent documents, but it just went from one hand to another. So in 2008, my attorney in Chapel Hill, Lisa Reynolds, she even filed a motion in Chapel Hill in North Carolina about the divorce decree that Cece had filed. And she called me up one day. I was at the Social Security office, and she called me one day. She said, guess what? It's fraudulent. It's void. I mean, I was just so thrilled. I said, oh, this is in 2008. I won. Of course, it took me quite a long time to do it. In 2010, the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, I was even doing pro se work on my side. I was petitioning the U.S. Court of Appeals, and they said that finally the board must provide expedited treatment. In other words, that was in 2010, and I didn't get any resolution until 14 years after that. This fact is the very reason why I want to testify before the U.S. court. I want to testify before the Senate and House committees, because the laws that they're doing, there is no way that there's anybody even enforcing the rulings by the top court to be complied to by the BVA. I am a living proof on that. I was invited, Brian, to share my story in Washington, D.C. in 2017 by Commander John Wells. He's over military veterans advocacy, and he's in Louisiana. I had never met him, but he had heard about my story. And the former chair, when we got up there, the former chair of the Senate VA committee, his name was Senator Johnny Isaacson, and he's from Georgia also. I requested emphatically to be able to publicly speak before his committee. So when I went up there, Commander Wells and I went into his office, and his chief of staff discreetly said to me, Senator Isaacson will not let you testify, as you are also from Georgia, and he would be embarrassed because your case is so long and it would make him look bad. So Commander Wells and I had 16 meetings that week in private rooms with members of the Senate and House committees of the VA. However, they did nothing after that. Mm-hmm. I actually filed over 5 more petitions with the U.S. Court of Appeals over that time. I have to share with you one that was incredible. In 2019, after I filed a petition again with the U.S. Court of Appeals, Judge Margaret Bartley said, and I'll read a little bit of it. She said, even though she denied my appeal, she said, nevertheless, the court admonishes the VA for making another avoidable error in the processing of Ms. Caldon Sorkness's claim. And that was in 2019. And of course, the BVA did nothing. So that's why I want to testify. What are these rulings? They're not worth the paper they're written on. And if it's just mine, how many other veterans are they doing this to? I have always said, Brian, this is a reason why the increase in suicides has begun to escalate so hard. Mm-hmm. The VA secretary is now, of course, Denise McDonald, with whom I have corresponded with years and have gotten no responses. She trusts the fact that court trusts the BVA to do the right thing, and the secretary needs to be addressed in front of the VA committees. I have officially requested to testify publicly with my representative, Austin Scott. Over 10 years, I have never received a response that has done anything on that. One of the things I want to ask the members of the VA committees, why are the VA applications and documents not given the same scrutiny and verification required by the Social Security Administration? Mm-hmm. And why does the VA have total disregard to legal documents confirming the facts and lack of education by VA claims representative? I'll give you an example. When I went to one of my representatives in Atlanta, I was educating him on the laws. He didn't even know to what I was referring.
Yep.
If the law requires expeditious manner in claims remanded like mine, who in the VA is enforcing the law and ensuring that the compliance for veterans and their families is ensured? And who can enforce the rulings by the U.S. Court of Appeals? I feel strongly that noncompliance by the BVA is among the reasons that in 2019, the National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report confirmed that the number of veterans suicide exceeded 6,000 each year from 2000 to 2017. The Office of Inspector General in the VA also stated in news releases that there is horrendous gross mismanagement within the VA claim system. My case is one example of so many more. As the VA's unwritten policy says, stall, deny, and hope they die. I was told off the record, Brian, that they even have a statistic board in their offices, and they get awarded for how many no's they say to VAs, to veterans. If you say this many no's, then you've won the case. In other words, you've won their little inside competition.
Yeah, we definitely both know, having gone up against the VA on a federal level, within the halls and the walls of Washington, D.C., is not an easy walk. And, like you said, delay, deny, deflect until they die. And that is very true. And that is very real. I receive so many emails and phone calls and text messages from broken veterans who are suffering, due to the wounds of war. However, a lot of these veterans are taking their own lives, not because of the combat situation, but because of the VA creating a crisis moment for them to go back and relive those horrible moments to say, what was my service worth? They promised me when I raised my right hand to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, so help them God, that the VA would take care of them once they got home. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Not for all. I mean, maybe for some, but I can tell you the majority of these veterans that are coming home, they're trying to get veteran benefits, are being denied rightful compensation. And what does that do? It leads to substance abuse. It leads to, spousal problems and divorce and custody battles and veterans getting arrested and them going through veterans court and then trying to rebuild their lives. And really, at the end of the day, these veterans end up in such a horrifying place, riddled with anxiety and depression, that they feel their only way is to remove themselves from this world. And that is it. And that is horrifying. And to live in the United States of America, where we have an all volunteer force, that says something. But guess what? That all volunteer force is beginning to go away. We've seen the debacles that have gone on in Afghanistan when we pulled out and we withdrew and we cut and run. And from all of the endless wars that we have been in, for veterans to come home and get spat upon and then to get bad medical from the VA, and it there's really no incentive to serve this country anymore because of all of the bureaucratic BS and the red tape that you have to cut through when you get back. Not to mention the bureaucratic red tape when you're in the service. And we have got to get back to having a military that is just that, a military, and not, having all of the politics within the military to bring down who we are as Americans. And when we get out, we need to have the VA there as a number one valid resource for all veterans, and not a place where they go and have their anxieties increase and their depression increase because they're in a place where they don't feel as if, one, they're accepted, and two, the cards and the deck is stacked against them when they're within the VA. And so that right there, says it all. There's so many veterans. And then, like I said, they reach out to me because they feel like, hey, this guy will understand. I'm at the end of my rope right now. What else do I do? What options do I have here on the table? And unfortunately, with cases like mine and yours and tens and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of others over the last several generations, has proven to be true. You're a spouse. You've got 3 children with the man that passed away due to Agent Orange, and they absolutely railroad you on spousal benefits. And that's just one little tiny little story that comes out of the VA. I think I've heard them all, and I'm not, and I should be sitting here saying, "Oh my God, this is insane." But I mean, it doesn't surprise me. So let's get back to your story now. So this woman took your spousal benefit away from you and
Yes.
Jim's 3 children after 16 years of marriage. And like I said, when he left, it wasn't really on his own accord. He wasn't thinking clearly. He had mental issues going on from the shell shock of Vietnam that is now considered to be, like I said, post-traumatic stress.
Right.
And then he also had a cancer that was eating him away. So what did this spousal benefit look like? Was there a dollar amount attached to it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was about, at that point, it was about $1,200 or $1,300 a month. It is now $1,600 a month, but it's not even taxes. It's not tax. She, over the 27 years, she received over $300,000. And, well, I mean, like I said, I had to pay for schools and, for 16-year-old teenagers and everything. But I had so many loans and trying to get through. And I worked for higher education for over 20 years. In fact, I used to work for the chancellor at UNC Chapel Hill when we were in Chapel Hill, when my husband and I were married. And when I came back to Macon, I worked for a president here in Macon, Georgia. After 15 years there, Brian, unfortunately, I had to speak up because of some issues that they were having, and I lost my job. And I ended up losing that home to foreclosure. But for speaking up because of what they were doing under the table, that's another story. But these sacrifices that we're making because we speak up for what's right, in many ways are never ending. But because of my family, the Vietnam War was not over. It's also important, very important to remember right now, Brian, that these serious issues in the VA, they're not Democrat and they're not Republican. They're American. I was represented, by the way, for 12 years by a firm in Bethesda, Maryland called Bergman & Moore. And the thing that concerned me about that process, it was paperwork over paperwork. If I got another document that said 60 more days, 90 more days, I almost got to a point where I started laughing. I said, 60 more days, 90 more days. They wanted me to stall, deny, and hope I die. Mm-hmm. So I have not mentioned that I also had some serious medical issues during all of this. I had 3 meningiomas, and that's benign brain tumors, but that's another story. And I got through it because I was not going to let that stop me. They did obtain, this Bergman & Moore did obtain one milestone, which strengthened my perseverance and determination and this is what was given to me, never give up. So I didn't. And I'll tell you what that milestone was. My attorney there, Brian Anderson, called me one day and he said, Denise, I had a virtual conference with 2 top attorneys at the VA about your case and this was in December of 2020. And he said they admitted they made an egregious error. And that's their exact words. Oh my goodness, we made an egregious error. They're going to do a joint motion for remand to fix it. That was in January 2021. Of course, it was paperwork that continued and continued. So I finally I stopped having them as my power of attorney and I went to someone else. I went to the commissioner of Georgia, Patricia Ross. I had her very briefly, but during that time, she's the one that got me an affidavit from the gentleman that was her assistant commissioner. And he said, oh, I used to be in the Macon office. And yes, we messed it up. We did not even look at and confirm the fraudulent documents that CC had given. So I did have that affidavit. After that, God has our paths crossed for a reason. And a young gentleman named Wes McCauley in Valdosta, Georgia, he's a VA attorney. He is now my power of attorney. And the first thing he said to me was very interesting. I want everybody to listen to this. He said, first and foremost, Denise, you're a legacy file. You need to get out of that legacy file system and come over to the modernization. And nobody had ever mentioned that before to me. And he did the process for me. And he said, first off, the BVA judge, and I won't mention his name, that took your case over 2 decades ago, you need to make sure he's recused. You need a new BVA judge that will look at this in the modernization file, not the legacy file. It basically, it stated with no further steps. Anyway, after that, I got him, and he was able to get me recused, and he was able to, that judge, and he was able to get me in the modernization. And all of a sudden, on March 26th of 2024, Wes gave me a call, and he said, Denise, are you sitting down? He said, I need to tell you, we made it. We did it. And I received word that the BVA judge, Matthew Tenner, had granted my 28-year appeal. Wow. And I basically just cried. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I said, can you tell me that again? He said, we did it. We did it. So this young attorney did it in 2 years.
So 28 years of back pay for you and your 3 children?
Yes. 3 months later, I got 24 years. They still owe me for some more years because they took it that I had filed in 2004. I had filed in 1996, and that's why the affidavit was important. The group in Macon wouldn't let me file, even though I tried. So I'm supposed to get more back pay soon. But in June of 2024, I received a direct deposit check for at least 16 years. I was overwhelmed because I was so in debt, and now I'm debt free. But it took me 28 years to do it.
So I got a question. Did Jim ever do any paperwork with his, mistress? Yeah. Did he ever change the next of kin or anything on his will?
He did on his will, but we were told later that in other words, we talked about that. He was not in his. I have confirmation from his attorney. From his doctor out there that he was 100% mentally and physically disabled. So
he would have needed somebody to, because if you are in that frame of mind, you are considered to be legally incompetent, correct?
Yes, and I did try to do that paperwork, and my son at the time, my oldest son, said, "Mom, if we do that, we're going to have to clarify that he was mentally incompetent." And my oldest son did not really want me to do that, so I tried to do it the other way, which I did, and it worked. In other words, Cece was a scam artist. When I recently in July, I was so excited. I went to Robbins Air Force Base to get my ID, my spousal ID card. And when I was in there, the girl behind the counter said, "Oh my goodness, Cece is already gone after another one." I said, "I'm not shocked." I said, "The VA OIG needs to know that." In other words, she's now working on getting benefits from another veteran. According to that, I don't know that for sure, but that's what they told me, that she's in there now getting another one. So,
so did they ever go to her and say, you need to give us the $300,000 back that you fraudulently basically stole from us? And was there ever any justice? That's a major crime right there. It is.
In fact, she needs to be charged with federal fraud. I was informed that they have asked her to pay it back. And I got this about 4 days ago, Brian. This is her plead for them to reconsider. She said, "I was blindsided." In other words, this is a federal scam artist trying to get reconsideration. So my attorney, Wes McCauley, has assured me that that's never going to happen. So we are going to proceed. If needed, we're going to proceed with the OIG to go ahead and charge her with federal fraud. In the meantime, I am...
but that shouldn't be up to you to charge her for the federal fraud. That should be the federal government coming out and saying, we are going to indict you on these charges here, and you will be held to account. And the first thing we're going to do is you're going to go through a trial. And then after that, once we find you guilty, you're going to need to repay this $300,000 that you've stolen from a widow, yourself.
Right, exactly. I think that they told me the reason she filed this is because she don't want to have to pay it back. And by the way, she's remarried again and filing for another veteran. So she's doing exactly what she did with my husband. So
that's almost like Black Widow type stuff.
It is. That's exactly right. Yes. That's what I should nickname her. But
Wow.
I've decided that I'm at peace in the sense that I finally won. But I did want to share with you real quick when I called my oldest son, Sean, that day to let him know that we had finally won after 28 years. He got very quiet. And I said, Sean, are you okay? He said, Mom, he said, I need to tell you. He said, Logan and Brian, that's our other two children. We've been talking for years and years behind your back, wondering what in the world you were thinking. How in the world were you ever going to win this? And he said, Mom, you have proven to us that when you believe something in your heart and know that it's true, you need to fight because you will win. And he said, we will never forget that you've won, Mom. And that is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. Amen. My youngest son is now serving after 22 years. He's a lieutenant commander in the Navy nuclear program. And this is what our VA has done to a family that gave the ultimate sacrifice and still serves. So I just want to re-release my book that I published in 2015 because I want the government to know that you can't do this to all the families. That most of them do give up, but for a reason we did not. And I don't want
to. They make it so difficult on your mental psyche, the gaslighting. You start to second guess yourself. They put you into this, state of mind where, you feel like you have nothing left to offer and you have nothing left to give. And you're in this sad despair, grief ridden body. And you're fighting. That's all you know how to do. And the fighting becomes obsessive. Right. Like me, I was obsessed with this, and there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about what happened to me eight and a half years ago. And I know there's probably not a day that goes by that you don't think about what happened to you 28 years ago, because it has now been chiseled into our body. It's become a part of who we are as human beings. I mean, that's all we know how to do now is fight. And, and you never really know what you're going to do or how you respond to these tragic events when they happen until you're actually put in the fight. And, it does take special women like yourself to stand up in the face of adversity and take it head on, because all you've done is you've inspired other folks to say, if Denise can do it, I can do it. And we are living in a world right now where you have got to advocate for yourself, because nobody else is going to advocate for you, because it's so easy to give up. It is so easy to give up. And I know when I was going through it, I gave up like almost every single day. And then 3 hours later, I'd be like, nope, I'm back in the fight, because you get angry and you say, I'm done with this. And you throw something and then you say, nope, I'm right back in it, because I can't give up because my kids are watching me. And if I set the example that I'm going to give up, well, then they're going to give up in life.
Well, in fact, it was my children that actually kept me going in my strong faith. And I would like to share with you, this is my late husband and my son that's in the nuclear program, and my 5 grandchildren, and my son, my daughter is a certified school psychologist, and my oldest son is incredible doing corporate and business insurance in Atlanta. I'm just so extremely proud of them. And so I know that what I'm doing is because I want others to learn that if I can do it, then others can do it. If it takes 28 years, just continue. I'll never forget what Tyler Perry said one day. He said, you can get 1,000,000 no's, but if you get one yes from God, that's all you need.
Love it. That's very powerful.
Yes.
What has this taught you over the last 28 years? What has this taught you about life?
The strongest is that there are 3 important things, and I have it. There's not a room in my home that doesn't have a flag, and one of them says faith, family, and freedom, that we have to fight for it every day. Don't let the government take it away, because I know firsthand that most of our elected officials, unfortunately, need to be replaced, and that's why we need term limits. we need to have family members. I even said one day, I said, we need to have some grandmothers and mothers in there to straighten it up and then give it back to some others for a while. But I'll never forget before I even published my book, Brian, I was sitting at the computer and an email popped up and it was from Reese Witherspoon. And I thought, oh, I've got scam. And I said, no, I better look at it. And it was indeed, it was in 2015 in January. And it was a very long email from Reese Witherspoon. And she said, I spoke in Monteagle, Tennessee at a Republican place where I didn't even know it was going to be on YouTube later. And she said, I saw you speaking. And she said, your story must be told. This was in 2015. And we corresponded for 3 months. She was going to do a movie. And I said, not until I have a happy ending. And so I will probably reach out to her soon. But one of the last things she said to me was, my grandmother always told me, if you want anything done, get a Southern woman to do it. And I keep reminding myself, you're that Southern woman, Denise. You've got to teach others to fight. So there's nothing stronger than your will for your children and grandchildren.
So do you have a lot of veteran spouses that reach out to you for that? I mean, because you are that beacon of hope. Do you have a lot of folks that reach out to you as well?
Not as many as I would like. I think it's because they have basically, I actually tried to, I actually spoke to the Gold Heart for a long time. And that's another story for another day, because I'm not sure that they wanted to hear my story, because he wasn't an officer. I hate to say that, but because I admire them tremendously. But, I'm speaking for all veterans, not the ones that were officers. I'm speaking for all veterans. Right. I don't care if they served for 30 days, if they could have given their life. So I've decided that I really just want to speak. I want to release that book. And I even was told, don't get a soft copy, get a hard copy. This is your final story. And it needs to be told to a lot of people so that they will listen. And I am going to be sharing about 5 or 6 different veterans groups, like the Ken Gamble, and he's doing the Agent Orange Heart Foundation in Springfield, Tennessee. And I even had my husband's name engraved on that a couple of years ago. And my husband now has been wonderful, Randy, because he knows that this is who I am. This is part of who I am and will always be. So
how has he accepted your fight?
Well, he actually has accepted it. And he knew when we first, we've been together now, we've been married since 2013. And he said, that's part of who you are. Mm-hmm. And he said he thought that I would win eventually, but he didn't know it would take so long. That he's been very supportive. So, but I basically want to I want to, republish my book and get out and talk to people and let them know that that you have to continue what you're doing for your family.
Sure. Yeah. And for the greater good of the country. You've been talking about that a lot. Every room in your house has a flag in it. The government is not a reflection of that flag, because, we all believe that, that unfortunately they've become very reckless and very ruthless. And, we can't allow that to, change our hearts and our minds about the flag that we all fall under as Americans, and what we fight for and what our values are over say a government, right? And that's unfortunate because, we've got so many years of all this good. We've kind of almost forgot how to fight on the homeland, to speak up and to speak out when things aren't right. And it doesn't mean burning things down. It means doing it honorably, and that's, and that right there says a lot about your character, is that it took 28 years for you to get that one yes, right? Yeah. And all those millions of no's, but you got the yes, and you got it at the right time. You probably wish it would have happened, 27 years ago, because you had to go through 27 additional years of hell, basically. Did it do anything to your mental health fighting for 28 years against this massive bureaucracy in the VA? I mean, it is hard to even stay on the phone for 2 hours sometimes to get a an operator to pick up to make a simple doctor's appointment.
Right. Well, it was
For
determination.
28 years, that ain't for the weak of heart right there.
No, and I definitely think it's my faith in my children. But in fact, one of my quotes that I have that I'm going to put in my book when I re-release it in a couple of months, it says, "God's redeeming purpose is done. You fought the fight, and the battle is won." I honestly believe. I said in my book that I did release, that I released in 2015 at the very end, I told the children that in 1980, when I walked down that aisle to marry your father, if I had known he had stage 4 non-hodgkins lymphoma, would I have walked down there anyway? And I said, God chose me for a reason. He knew that he wasn't going to be here long. And I said, and look at what I have now. I said, yes, I would have done that, because look, I have so many blessings now, and I have a purpose to help others.
Love it. So are you with Veterans for America First right now too?
Yes, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have been honored with Stan Fitzgerald, and I've been asked to be an ambassador for the Veterans for America Forever, and I was honored to do that. I told him, I said, my time is limited right now because I'm republishing my book. He said, no, we're going to be honoring you, and I'll let your story get out. So I was very happy with that. Yes. And I would like to mention one person in particular that has gone out of her way to help me. Her name is Murtis Frank, Franke. She's in Louisiana. She is with Senator Cindy Hyde Smith. And she told me that she heard about my case several years ago because Senator Hyde Smith is over the Southern District for veterans. Mm-hmm. And someone came to her and said, and she was not medically well. So she said, she said, Murtis, I really want you to look at this case because this has to be resolved. And that person that gave her my name has since passed away. But she said, Murtis told me, she said, Denise, in 30 years that I've been in the senator's office, I've only seen 2 cases as bad as yours, and you're one of them. Mm-hmm. And so every time I pick up the phone, you know how long it takes to get to a senator's office? She picks up the phone and talks to me immediately. And she has given me a new feeling that, yes, there are some good elected officials out there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there are. There are a lot. And, that are in it for the right reasons. And unfortunately, we have a lot that are in it for the wrong reasons, and
that's right.
We're not going to get our country back to where it needs to be until people start to actually fight for the greater good of the country and not for the greater good of their, lobby dollars or, whoever they're, it's like they're supposed to represent us, the people, and they've gotten so comfortable that they just feel as if I can do whatever I want. I'm going to get reelected. It doesn't matter. And exactly. So there's so many people out there that have become voiceless. And,
one other thing, one other thing I want to mention is the BVA call center. Are you familiar with, I don't know if did you call the BVA call center to see the status of your claim or appeal? I used to do that every Monday, and I documented it every Monday. And they honestly did not know what they were doing. I mean, they didn't even know half the time what my case was or where it was. And it took me 10 minutes to prove. I had to give blood type to tell them who I was. But and they make it look so simple. I'm going, this is not easy for veterans that are homeless and are not doing well mentally. So as soon as I got off the phone with the BVA call center, I would immediately call the VA hotline. And I got to a point where I would call and talk to the supervisor over there, and her name is Kathy. She was incredible. And she would say, oh, Denise, keep going, keep going. And I mean, in other words, I finally found someone at the hotline that knew me, and she would send my latest issue, the fact that it just kept going in circles over to the BVA. It did go in circles like Commander Wells says. It's a hamster wheel. It just goes in circles. We've got to stop that for veterans.
Amen. Absolutely. Your walk has definitely been honorable, and I know it's changed the lives of many. You've given a lot of folks out there hope,
Yeah, thank you.
and I know you've inspired so many others out there to remain in the fight and to stand
Right.
up in the face of adversity and to persevere and show those great signs of resilience.
Right.
Again, when you know you're right on something,
Mhm. Right.
you got to always just keep going,
Yes.
because you can't let the evil prevail. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
you got to shine that light on this, on this negativity. And, even when it gets to be so dark, you need to find
Mhm.
that even if you got a glimmer of light, that
Yeah.
light can illuminate and completely remove that darkness. If
Yes.
and that's exactly what you did. 28 years in the dark, and then all of a sudden, boom, your lights came on, and and
Yeah.
it's
Thank
changed.
you.
It's changed your life,
Mhm.
for the bad and then up into the good. But unfortunately, it took a lifetime
It
to get.
did. It did. When I had the surgeries, a couple of, the last one was in 2021. People would say, "How do you keep going with the VA when you've got to go to Emory and have this brain surgery?" I said, "You know what? That's just God's way of slowing me down, because
Mm,
he knows he needs to slow me down for a couple of weeks, but I get right back up."
yep, that's exactly how I am. I go through days where, because I'm a chronic pain patient, and
Mhm.
I suffer from so many other things too, and it's like,
Right.
got to put me back in my chair for a little bit. And he's like, hey, sit
Yes.
down. You need to, because I'm an alpha male. It's like my
Yeah.
mind still thinks I'm 18, 19, 20 years old. But my body's telling me that I feel like I'm in my 90s at times. So,
You and I
well,
are a lot
listen,
alike.
yeah. Oh, yeah, we are.
Mhm.
We are definitely warriors when it
Yes.
comes to fighting a very
Yes.
broken bureaucratic system. And
Right.
again, it shouldn't take folks like us to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
it should already be a no-brainer if they see
Yes.
an issue to fix it
Right.
themselves. But when elected officials fail
Mhm.
to do their jobs, sometimes citizen advocates need to do it and pick up the slack where we are. And that's why it's so important right now, especially in
Yeah.
this day and age, to
Right.
be a citizen advocate and to do it the
Yes.
right way.
Yes.
Because if we don't, they will
Mhm.
never change it. It's too beneficial on their end.
Right.
It means
Mhm.
too much to them. It's too profitable to
Mhm.
them to do what's right. And like you said, they've got the board up, another no, another no, another no. Oh,
Yeah.
look at all the money we're saving and this and that. I know that they do the same thing in the Office of General Counsel as well,
Oh, yeah.
on Vermont Street in Washington, D.C. I've been in that building.
Right.
And I've had meetings with a lot of those folks in there who make the decisions, like the VA secretary and the undersecretary and the chief counsel. And
Mhm.
it's unreal because, I did the honorable thing too. When I went in there, I said, before I go to Congress to change this law, I'm going to give you
Right.
guys right now the opportunity to go in there and make the change yourself, because I know you can do it. And they said, no, good
Right.
luck on Capitol Hill. Well,
Yes.
the rest
Yes.
is history, and all these bills behind me and these frames have been passed. So
I
I guess I got
I
the last laugh at the end. And those, forever see our names, right? Forever inked in that federal law of these
yes.
citizen advocates that went out there and did their job for them,
Mhm.
even when they were told no, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah, I know that.
So
I
listen, thank you so much for joining us today. We sincerely
Thank you.
appreciate everything you have done and continue to do,
Thank
in the
you.
military and the veteran community, and all the
Thank you.
inspiration that you've put out there. So many other advocates to keep on going.
Thank you, Brian, so much for having me. It's been my pleasure and my honor. I will always remember meeting you. I tell my grandchildren all the time, whenever you see a active military, salute. You just stop, and he does. Especially my 12, my grandchildren, they always salute. I said, you've got to remember why you're here and why you have freedom.
Yes, ma'am. You are definitely one of the good ones. A good old Southern belle. If you need anything done, just get a Southerner, right?
Right. Thank you. God
Show them
bless
with
you.
kindness. Yep,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Yes, ma'am. You do the same. Well, folks, there you have it. Denise, she's an author, and she's getting her book re-released. Boy, I tell you what, 28 years of fighting this bureaucracy that we call the VA. It is not an easy fight. Stall, deny, and hope they die is the name of her book, The VA's Unwritten Policy, and the story of one widow's 28-year battle with the VA. Now, folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It has never been easier to listen. We're on Facebook, we're on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and X. All you got to do is just search Today with Tally Podcast, and it should populate and pop right up for you. Also learn more about me and my personal story, and perhaps even get my new book at briantally.com. That's briantally.com. I didn't choose this job. It chose me. Sounds oddly familiar to what Denise went through. It didn't choose, it chose her. It didn't choose anybody else, because they know that God gives certain missions to folks out there, and it's up to us to answer that call of service when called upon. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time for the Today with Tally podcast, this is Brian Tally. Good night. Semper Fi. God bless.